Hilton brings you new ways to stay, with experiences that let you capture the glory days. Introducing the Graduate Hotels. Each inspired by local college towns, these stays are always original and never boring. Get in touch with traditions all across the country and enjoy a stay that's a class above the rest. Book at Graduate Hotels with Hilton Honors Points at Hilton.com. It's a win-win. Hilton, for the stay.
Ryan Reynolds here from Mint Mobile with a message for everyone paying big wireless way too much. Please, for the love of everything good in this world, stop. With Mint, you can get premium wireless for just $15 a month. Of course, if you enjoy overpaying, no judgments, but that's weird. Okay, one judgment. Anyway, give it a try at mintmobile.com/switch.
Upfront payment of $45 for 3-month plan, equivalent to $15 per month required. Intro rate first 3 months only, then full price plan options available. Taxes and fees extra. See full terms at mintmobile.com.
That particular day, I rode my motorcycle to work. And I pull out of my parking garage, and for the first time in 7 years in that office, for the first time ever, I turned right instead of left to go into town, which I'd never done before. I waited for a green arrow that was just for me. I was the only person in the left turn lane. And as I got a green arrow just for me, and I eased out to make a left turn, a full-size SUV went through the opposing light and hit me in the face, killing me instantly.
Welcome to Critical Incidents Podcast. I'm your host, Kyle Ashley, a law enforcement veteran with over a decade of experience. Each episode, I'll be interviewing people about their own critical incident, a moment in their lives that shaped who they are today. From life-threatening emergencies to personal struggles, we'll hear firsthand accounts of resilience, determination, and the power of the human spirit. So, join me on this journey through some of the most critical incidents that have changed people's lives forever.
My name is Krishnanand, and my critical incident was I was hit in the face by an SUV and killed instantly. Dead on the street, bloody, mangled, and dead.
That's an introduction right there. Tell us a little bit about what happened prior to the incident you went through.
Well, when you say prior, I've had a very supernatural, very colorful, adventurous life. And I mean, it's been what I refer to now as a string of pearls, crown of thorns. I've had as many blessings as I've had tragedies, and they're all extraordinary. And so prior to any of this, I was a regular guy in many ways, except that I, in my youth, spent time on the streets. I was a dope fiend criminal involved with one of the most notorious counterfeiting and dope fiend gangs in Los Angeles. And that's kind of how I grew up. And so eventually I got clean and sober, and I had a child, and I made him my life. And he's a firefighter now, so I guess I did a pretty good job. He's amazing. And I started a contracting company. I was a commercial construction building contractor for many, many years. Became quite successful. Started from the ground up. I borrowed $350 from an uncle, and I was able to start a company. And within 3 years, was making triple digits and doing pretty well. And one day I woke up and I was like, you know what? I'm sick of this. I don't like it anymore. It's not fulfilling. It was a good career, but it wasn't fulfilling to me on the inside. And I got very depressed. And I thought, what am I going to do with my life? And so I did a 180, and I slowly phased out my construction. When I say slowly, it was really only a matter of a few months, and learned how to become a private practice counselor. Now, we're not talking about a degree. I couldn't go to college and do all that stuff. I didn't have time. I was a single parent. And I started doing hypnotherapy because I thought it was fun. It was really fun. I was really good at it. And eventually it wasn't enough to pay the bills. And so I became an addiction counselor because I was like, well, I know about that because I am one. I know it really well because I solved it by myself. I went through all kinds of supernatural crazy stuff. So as soon as I began that, my practice exploded overnight. I went from a few clients a week to 10 hours a day, 6 days a week, sometimes on Sundays too. And I was nicknamed the cavalry counselor behind my back. I didn't even know this. Around Los Angeles, I was referred to as the cavalry counselor, the guy to call when no one else can get the job done. And I was proud and honored to do this work, saving people that some of the top professionals industry people could not save. And so I was innovative and different. And after my death experience, which we're going to be going into when I got hit in the face with the SUV, I was already anticipating that career was going to eventually burn out. You can't do it forever. It's a very intense in the trenches work. And so I had already factored in and began transitioning to be an author. I was always a writer. I had 3 books ready to go. And so then this death thing occurred, and now I'm doing something different. So we're talking a couple of 180s that I basically get shifted, paradigm shifts brought to me in alarming ways.
Yeah, that seems like a lot of different turns in life. And can you kind of go into a little bit more in depth of the way that you were helping people recover and things like that? Can you kind of explain that a little bit more?
Yes, thank you for asking, because I consider God's work, it's a grace and blessing to be involved. So as an addict myself, growing up as a criminal, and I mean, again, the people that I ran with in my youth were some of the most sinister criminals and dope fiends in the entire Southern California region. We knew all the sheriffs by name. They knew us by name too. We knew when they were on vacation, so we knew we could run amok and all that kind of stuff. So I wasn't trying to save the world when I became an addiction counselor and specialist. I was just trying to make a better living and not have to go back to construction, my contracting business. And I found that I had a natural knack for it. And I was able to do, because I was a dope fiend, shoot 'em up, needle in my arm, dope fiend, and became very successful, very educated, and very intelligent, that I was able to do what most professionals were not able to do. I innovated. And so as I was about 5 or 6 years into my private practice, I began to document it. And sure enough, now I have a whole book and video course, and it's nothing like any other addiction recovery process you had, because what it does is it teaches you how to design your own path and method to recovery. And you can grab in pieces of every other modality that's out there, and you can put them together. And that's what I do as a counselor, is I customize what works for you, because what works for you may not work for anybody else. You can't treat heroin like an alcoholism. It's not the same animal. And so I learned how to customize for individual personalities, drug use, and we're not talking just drugs, sex, shopping. I had clients that were pathological thieves. They were addicted to stealing. And so all these kind of things. And again, I had to customize for every individual because everyone's different. And so it was just beautiful work, and I loved it very much. And I'm glad that I was able to document it, my own innovative styles and my own innovative methods that saved lives. And while the recovery industry has a sad less than 8% success rate, I had 98. Now, I wasn't dealing with millions, but I had 98 because I cared and because I really customized it to each individual. So that's what I was doing as a private practice counselor, and also dealing with some of the most severe pathologies. We're talking about some of the most very severe disorders. And so I was able to navigate through many of these things as a counselor when most people weren't, because I was able to do it individually instead of going by some book. I was able to figure things out for this person. And I love the work. And again, being able to save people when no one else could. People that are making twice my money, psychiatrists and doctors that are making twice my money, couldn't help these people. And I was able to do it. And it was wonderful. It was God's work to be able to do. So, and I did that I still do some of it. I'm mostly retired from it now because of the accident that I had. And, I just love doing it. And it was something that I was very grateful to be able to come across and realize that I just had a natural knack for it. I loved it.
That's awesome. Did you kind of come up with this format based on your own experience? You looking into I'm sure getting recovery, and you're like, well, let me figure out a way that works for me versus trying to go through a 12-step program or something along that. Is that kind of the basis on how you kind of got started with this type of program?
Yes. As a matter of fact, 12 steps did not work for me. I'm not saying anything bad about it. It works for a lot of people, but for some people it doesn't. And the people that it doesn't work for, they need something else. I'm very cerebral. I'm very educated and intellectual. I would say educated. I don't have a formal education really, but I'm very educated. I've been reading, studying, and I've had a prodigious intellect all my life. And so regular things bored me. And instead, and my drug issue really was because I found life to be very boring and I wanted adventure. And there's a lot of addicts like me. And so my method The Project Addiction Solution is what it's called, PAS. It's a video course and it's a whole book, and it's all you need. It's guaranteed. I'm the only one that guarantees the recovery process. It's guaranteed. If it doesn't work, you get your money back. That's how confident I am in it. And it works all the time. And so what I did was I began to apply to my clients what I learned through my own recovery, because I had to do it completely on my own because no one could help me. And as I did that, we had to modify and adapt to their different personalities, their different drug use, their different dynamics, their family, their background, their history, and all that. And so what I was able to do was eventually patchwork together a whole conglomeration of systems to teach you how to design your own recovery system. And again, everything is covered. The book has entire chapters on 12-step, on rehabs, on hospitalization, everything, medications. Every chapter is its own separate modality, but it teaches you how to pick and borrow from each one to put your own recovery style together. And I innovated some other things as well. And again, this is why it's guaranteed, because I know it works. And so, yes, it's a combination of both. To your question is that, yes, it was inspired by and derived from my own recovery, but also because, again, I'm not like anybody else. Everybody's different from me. So there's also all the people that I worked with over the decades. They're the ones that really get a lot of credit because they help me modify and teach how to customize to each individual.
That's awesome. You're going through this, you now have your own practice, you got all these clients, and you're moving through life. Is there a point in time where you are, I need to do something else, I need to expand this? Do you want to keep growing this, or you want it to do something different?
No, I was very, very content doing what I was doing. I knew someday, because I'm a very restless spirit, I've always been restless. I like to innovate and think of new things. And so I figured that someday burnout, I'm giving you air quotes there. So burnout is a staple for counseling professionals. Eventually you can't do it anymore. You just burn out. And when you burn out, people that stay in it, they end up hurting people and not caring enough. I made a vow. I took a vow. When I started, I said, when I hit burnout, I'm going to get out. I'm not just going to be in it for the money anymore. And so I predicted that I would eventually burn out. And again, I was already writing my books. And so it wasn't about expanding. See, what's wrong with the recovery empire is they want to treat everybody the same. They want to put them all in one house. No, it's got to be individualized. The reason they have an 8% success rate and 92% failure rate is because they're trying to treat everybody the same, and you can't do it. So you've got to customize it to each individual. I had many offers to not just sell my practice, but also to merge myself with bigger organizations and corporations. And I refused all of them because I didn't like what they were doing. And I said, no, that goes against everything that I represent and stand for. And so I didn't want to expand that. So I was very happy with what I did. I found and developed a nearly perfect system. So I wasn't going to change that. My desire to change careers really wasn't happening during the death experience. It was coming at some point in the future. I knew that, but I wasn't feeling that at the time. I was going strong and very passionate about my work as a counselor until one day.
I'm so glad you brought up the burnout, right? Because a lot of people, regardless of like what your profession is, I think we all run into burnout at some point in time. And you even said that people stop caring as much about what you're doing, like what your job is in that line of work, and helping other people. Burnout can be a dangerous thing, especially when it comes to helping other people. So I'm glad you brought that up, because I think a lot of people, when they think of burnout, they think, oh, it's just an accountant, like, oh, I don't have to worry about burnout, or, you know, all of these different professions. But being able to understand that when you get burnout, you're going to affect so many other people. And I applaud you for understanding that, because a lot of people really have a hard time of moving past that or doing something. What does the day look like when you go through your incident? How does that day start? And kind of walk us through that.
Let me back up for just a moment and say thank you for acknowledging that, because yes, burnout, and I know a little bit about your background too. Burnout for professionals that are in the helping and rescuing field ain't the same thing as an accountant, is it? When I burn out, people are putting their lives in my hands. People are putting their realities in my hands, and they're looking to me. And if I mislead them, well, then I'm, again, as you mentioned, there's a domino effect that's going to affect a lot of people, and that's a tremendous responsibility. And I would never betray that. For me, that's a sure ticket, go to hell. And you cannot. You're giving that responsibility, and so. My family was often, times they were frustrated because we'd be on vacation or doing something, and I'd get a call from a client in a crisis. Hey, can't you take that later? Why do you get it with your clients? Say, look, my job is not a matter of convenience. I have to be there for them when they need me, not when it suits my time and my schedule. And so, unfortunately, I said to one of my partners, I said, look, The reason we're here on a vacation living this great life is because there are people in trouble that look to me for help, and they make this possible for me. This is how I pay my bills. I can't turn them away when they need help. I can't be on my convenience. I can't be on my schedule. So yeah, that burnout thing for helping professionals is very different than the accountant, and I had to be sensitive to that. So there I was in my office like any other day. Again, I was working 10 hours a day, back to back, and I was never like a 50-minute client session for my clients. I went usually up to 90 minutes or so. I wanted to make sure we had substantial time for all my clients. This isn't the kind of job you can rush through. It's a very personal, intimate interaction you're having with people as they're lying, bearing their souls to you. And so my sessions were a bit longer. So suddenly, this day, I had 3 clients call and reschedule back to back. And I was like, that's unusual. I mean, I get rescheduled pretty often, but 3 back to back, suddenly I had 4 hours to kill and nothing to do because I was back to back all day and I didn't bring any other work. That particular day, I rode my motorcycle to work. I have a very unusual motorcycle. It's called an MB3 500. And it's kind of hard to describe. They're very popular in Europe, very rare here in the US. And there's 2 wheels in the front, but it's a very unusual bike. And there's a reason I'm mentioning that because it'll come up later in the story. I rarely rode my bike, but that day I rode my bike to work. I had 3 clients reschedule. I called my girlfriend and I said, you know what? I got nothing to do. You want to go for a walk? She says, oh, I can't. I got something going on, some work, whatever. And I said, but go. I know you'll have a good time. I said, I can't. I don't have my shorts and some shoes. She goes, oh, that's why you wanted me to come. I said, yeah, kind of. And I said, all right, I'm going to go to the street to the clinic and get a physical because I'm overdue. So 7 years in that office, and I went down on my bike. I changed my clothes from my office clothes to a t-shirt and some pants, put on my riding clothes, full jacket, even though it's a warm June day, full helmet, gloves, the whole bit. I'm always safe. And I pull out of my parking garage, and for the first time in 7 years in that office, for the first time ever, I turned right instead of left. You're going to town, which I'd never done before. To this day, I don't know how or why I chose to turn left instead of right. I'll never know why. And that's the only time I ever did. And 3 blocks later, I stopped at a red light and waited for a green arrow that was just for me. I was the only person in the left turn lane. And as I got a green arrow just for me, and I eased out to make a left turn, a full-size SUV went through the opposing light and hit me in the face, killing me instantly. Now, I mentioned to you that I changed clothes. Nothing's gratuitous. The shirt I happened to have on me that day, I don't have it with me here, I'd show it to you on the video, was my Museum of Death shirt. I've got a dozen shirts from concerts, from Stonehenge, from places I've toured and been to throughout the world. The one I chose that day that I got killed was my Museum of Death shirt that shows a dismembered, like, cartoon cat on it. It's very funny. I still have it because the paramedics sheared it off me. Now, I'm dead on the street, mangled, bloody, and killed. I was killed instantly. On the corner, there is a tire store, and on the other corner is a Jack in the Box restaurant, okay? At the tire store, in the front of the tire store, is a guy on his cell phone. He's the first guy that sees it, and he runs over because he's a pastor. Of all people, he's a pastor. He began reading me my last rites. He pulls me from it and reads me my last rites because I'm dead. I have no heartbeat. I've got blood coming from my eyes, my nose, my mouth, and my ears. He begins reading me my last rites because he figures God put him there at that moment for a reason, to save this soul. On the other corner at the Jack in the Box are 2 paramedics at the front of the drive-thru line getting lunch. If they wanted burgers, if they wanted tacos instead of burgers that day, I would not be here. If they were in the back of that drive-thru line, I would not be here because they're in the front of that drive-thru line at that Jack in the Box. At that moment, they saw the accident occur, or on it in seconds, bringing my body back to life. I was in a stage 3 Glasgow coma. My son, who is now an EMT, called me about a year ago because he became an EMT some time ago, and he said, oh my God, Dad, you were in stage 3. And I go, yeah. He goes, yeah, I just wonder where that is. He goes, this is truly a miracle. Stage 3 Glasgow coma is synonymous with death. When EMTs and paramedics find you're in a stage 3, they literally shrug their shoulders and say it's in God's hands now. There's only one stage lower. Well, there is a stage 1 and 2, but 1 is dead. 2 is irrecoverable. 3 is synonymous with death as well. And then it goes on from there's a 4 and a 5. I mean, the worst stage of coma known to medical science, and literally they just shrug their shoulders and say, it's in God's hands now. That's all we can't do anything about it. They literally can't do anything. The ambulance showed up, took me to ICU, and I was in a coma for 9 days. I woke up on my birthday. So let me backtrack just a moment here and give you a little summary. I'm wearing a Museum of Death t-shirt on the day that 3 clients rescheduled, which had never happened before. I turned right instead of left, which had never happened before. I got a pastor on one corner, a paramedic on the other. I have a stage 3 Glasgow coma, a DAI brain injury, and I wake up 9 days later on my birthday. It's becoming pretty strong evidence, even to atheists, that this is a supernatural event. Now, as a spiritualist person, I knew this, I already knew that, and so I really wasn't kind of too surprised because I've had a supernatural life all my life. But the undeniability of it, the irrefutability of it was, again, undeniable. We've got a collection of things now. Now, the brain trauma that I experienced was a DAI, diffuse axonal injury. We hear about TBI all the time on the news because of athletes, et cetera, traumatic brain injury. DAI is the worst version of TBI known to medical science. It's when the white and gray layers of your brain sever. I never know when the tears are going to come, man. And listen, the tears, surprisingly, don't come because it was horrifying for me. Honestly, I was in a coma. I wasn't scared for shit. I didn't know what was going on. What the tears come from is when I repeat it, I know what my family and the loved ones that I went through for me, and I feel so bad about causing them fear or pain. And so the DAI is a diffuse axon where your white and gray layers shift and sever. They shear. That means the billions of neurons that connect the two, when they sever, every neuron you have in your brain is responsible for an action, moving your finger, listening, hearing, walking, talking, whatever. And when they sever, they don't have to do anything anymore. When I woke up from my coma, I did not know my name. I did not know who I was. I did not know how to walk. I did not know how to talk. And listen, I'm not telling you I forgot. I'm not saying I had amnesia. It's like it was completely deleted. When the hospital staff asked me if I knew who these people were, this girl and this boy, my wife and my son, I had no idea not only who they were, but didn't even know what a wife or son was. Didn't know what hospital was. My identity was deleted. It wasn't forgotten. It was deleted. I had to learn how to walk and talk, same as an infant does. So that's the day of the incident, up until 9 days later when I woke up on my birthday. So the photo, there's a photo of me in the coma. When my son and wife showed up at the hospital, they were met by 2 doctors and a priest. That's not a good sign. Okay, that is for one reason only. They were told, if he ever wakes up, which by the way, he won't. They didn't want to get their hopes up. Like, by the way, he won't. It's never happened. No one's ever woke up from what he's going through. And so, but if he does, he will need plastic surgery. And even then, he'll be deformed and maimed for life. I had lacerations and scars. My face was mangled. 9 days later, when you look at the picture of me with a birthday candle and a birthday balloon, because they brought it in for my birthday, my son and my girlfriend, my partner's daughter are standing next to me singing me happy birthday. And I look like I know what's going on. They took a little video. I don't have a scratch on me. I woke up 9 days later without a scratch. So the miracles just kept on happening.
I just have a couple questions. You make a different turn out of your office than you usually do, right? Never have you gone out of your office that way.
The right turn was traffic in a large boulevard street. The left turn was a small side street into town. I never once turned. I never did before, never since again. To this day, I never know why. I don't know why I decided to do that day. I have no idea. I'm sure there was a reason, but I have no idea.
Yeah. And so you're sitting at the light and this SUV runs the red light and hits you head on. Do you see this coming? Does it blindside you? Does it last minute? I mean, obviously you're saying you don't remember these things, but like the recount of like what you've heard from other people, was there anything that was like, it looked like you tried to get out of the way, or was it just?
I'm sure I had some type of survival instinct, defensive move, but there was nothing I could do. And so, no, I have zero recollection of the event itself, that moment, and don't want to.
Yeah.
Okay. I'm sure some of it's denial, some of it's repressed, and that's just finally, I don't ever want to remember it.
Yeah.
Listen, I worked by that intersection, so I had to go back through it for several years. I still lived in the air back then. And I mean, obviously, talk about PTSD, any intersection would cause a PTSD moment. And so I don't know if I repressed the memory of the event itself, or if it's just forgotten and didn't where it wasn't brought back as my memory was restored, or what. I don't care. I don't want to remember it and don't need to. So all I know is, honestly, I didn't remember up to that day. I mean, it slowly has come back. I mean, I was told about the client's reschedule. I was told about calling my girlfriend and telling her that I was going to be wiped. I didn't know any of this till they told me. I didn't know about the pastor on the corner until 2 years ago, when I was talking to my son's mother, my ex-wife from years ago, and we're having this casual conversation, and she says, blah, 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 something about Pastor Tom. And I said, who? She goes, Pastor Tom. And I said, what about Pastor? Who? What are you talking about? She goes, oh my God, you don't remember, do you? She says, Pastor Tom's the first guy that pulled you from the wreck, read your last rites. I had no idea this till 2 years ago.
Wow.
Came up in a rather casual conversation, so I had no idea of that. Same with paramedics and all that. It's in my report, the hospital and the police report, but in that I would have had no idea.
Wow. You wake up from this coma 9 days later and can't talk, can't walk. What about in your mind? Like, do you understand? Obviously, you might not understand what's going on, but do you understand words? And like when they say like you're in the hospital, you're like, I don't even know what the hospital is, but I can understand that what you're saying is the word hospital. Can you walk me through that?
That's a great question. And it's one of the first times I've been asked that in that way. So thank you. Conceptually, yes, I knew what was going on, but literally, no. So I didn't know what a hospital was in a literal sense, but I did have a adult brain. So I was able to relearn very quickly. I had muscle memory, you could say. So I was able to relearn very quickly. But again, I didn't know what a wife was, let alone who she was. I didn't know what these things were. But at the same time, this is the paradox. The enigma of the event is that I am dualistically, simultaneously having a supernatural occurrence and a medical occurrence. And so I am completely bereft of any kind of self-awareness, really, and at the same time, completely aware in a wise, almost omniscient way. I mean, I was plugged in and connected to you could say, dimension of awareness and knowledge and things that were supernatural. And yet, here on the plane of Earth, I was like, duh, who's that? Again, it's impossible to describe to someone who doesn't have a DAI, but I was having a multiple set of conditions that could not possibly understand that was happening at the time. It took years to be able to slowly learn. Now understand that here I am having near-death experience, an NDE as they call it. At that time, even though I've lived a supernatural life, I'm a master theologian, mystic, spiritualist, and had been for years. Even though all that, I never even heard the term NDE before. I learned it 4 years later when I moved to Washington. And how I learned that is in my new book too, because it's supernatural itself. How I never heard of it as supernatural, then how I did come to hear of it, and I started to read it and study it. And when I started to study it, I'm like, oh my God, this is what I had. This is why I was so confused, because I was stuck in 2 dimensions at once. My body was in the material world and my brain was, but my spirit and my consciousness was kind of hovering in this other dimension for 4 years. I was kind of interacting with both. So conceptually, I did know, and again, it's such a fascinating question because I've never had anybody ask me that. And so I've never been able to try exactly explain it as I do in the book, is that simultaneously having both. I know what's going on, and yet I have no idea what's going on.
I can't imagine. It's interesting for me to try to put my mind into that space. You say the delete button is pressed on like your information. So, like I have kids. So when you try to teach your kids, like what is hot, right? You can show them what it is. You can explain to them what it is. But when you say the word hot, they don't associate that with anything. You don't have a reference point. So I just assume when you're saying that, your reference points of everything and your knowledge of it is gone.
Yes. Precisely. Yeah, as I mentioned to you, my identity was deleted. So a lot of the stuff was still there somewhere, but I couldn't access it. A lot of the stuff like how to function and how to walk was there somewhere, but they weren't connected. So again, your neurons have to connect in order for these functions to be able to occur. So it's there somewhere, but you can't connect them. It's like everything you are about you, everything you know and are is in a file cabinet, but you have no idea where the file is.
Yeah. Wow. You go through this, you wake up. How long does it take you to kind of relearn everything? How does that process look?
Well, this is why I am deemed a medical miracle. Now, the chief of brain neurology at UCLA got a hold of me a couple months later and asked to see me. And this is the chief of brain neurology at UCLA. I mean, of course I'm going. Offered to send me a car, and I said, no, I can get a ride. I'm down there and I'm being interviewed by him, and he keeps saying to me, when was your accident? Da-da-da-da-da. When was your accident? And I said, why do you keep asking me that? He goes, here it comes again. Sorry. And he says, because I'm looking at your file. And he says, I don't understand, as a brain neurologist, I don't understand how you're sitting upright and talking to me right now. I'm looking at your fMRI, and I do not understand how you're sitting up and talking to me right now. And I said, look, man, I'm just trying to survive. I'm just trying to endure this shit. This is horrifying. And I'm sorry, I lost my emotion, or I lost track with the answer I was giving to you. What was your question again?
No, you're fine. You're recovering from this, and so you go see the neurologist, and he starts explaining. So, like, how long did the process kind of take, and what was going on through that?
I'm learning every day, but I'm also forgetting. So what I would learn on Monday, Tuesday, some of it, all of it could be completely forgotten. I never knew. I was unable to retain anything, and yet some things did stay. And so I learned how to walk upright, stand and walk somewhat. I was in the hospital for 18 or 19 days before I was released. I was not ready to be released. I was terrified. And so I learned how to do some of the basic functions, like go to the bathroom, which I didn't know anything about. And I was very determined. It was either, first I wanted to just die. I was like, fuck this, whatever it is, just so not worth it. I don't care about any of this. And then I decided to live because I thought I could be an inspiration to my son and the people that I loved. Other than that, I didn't care. And so I was working very hard because it was either, as Red says in Shawshank Redemption, get busy living or get busy dying. I didn't have a choice. I kept breathing in and out. I kept waking up. So I might as well figure out how to get out of this mess. And so I'm learning who I was. As I finally got home, my son's showing me through pictures. He's showing me articles. I'm a noted counselor. I'm prominent in my field. I'm a keynote speaker. I tour. I'm an author. And he's showing me all this stuff. Here's you're a 4-0 tennis player, scuba diver, you've been around the world. You and I went to this, went to that. All I'm thinking, I'm looking at this, I'm like, I can't be that guy. I'm all fucked up. I can't, this guy's phenomenal. I can't do that. So I'm learning who I was the way that you would learn about somebody in an article, in a newspaper. I'm learning about myself in an abstract way, not in a real way. And even as I'm learning this stuff, none of it feels familiar. And that's a great case in point. When I sat down from the hospital on my sofa, there's air quotes there, my son sits next to me and he says, how's it feel to be home, Dad? And I said, I know, I have the knowledge that that's my front door, that's my fish tank, this is my sofa, but none of it feels familiar. So I had no feeling of familiarity with anyone, including my son. I knew them intellectually, but had no sense of familiarity with any of them. So as I'm gaining my identity back, it was very academic for the first 4 years. I couldn't connect emotionally or with true memory or familiarity with anything. It was more remote. And the emotions that I had mostly were how terribly awful it was that I did not know who I was, that I had this past that I couldn't connect to, that I was learning about it like facts and it was fascinating, but I couldn't feel it. All I could feel was mourning because I felt like somebody had died, which I did, that somebody had passed on and left us and abandoned us. And it happened to be me.
Wow. If I think about trying to relearn, or if someone's trying to explain to me, hey, this is who you are, but you just don't feel that, you're like, I don't know. Like, the truth behind that, of accepting that truth and remembering or attempting to remember. And you said it took 4 years to kind of get over the learning process of like, this is who I was, and I guess this is who I am. Like, was there a kind of like a flick of a switch at some point, or was it just, you've accepted this as truth and all the things that people are telling you, or is it like memories coming back? How did that kind of go?
Understand that as the chief of brain neurology was explaining to me throughout, and anyway, all the specialists were explaining to me, when I would say to them, help me make sense of this, they would say, we don't know because you're the first one that's ever done this. No one's ever been doing what you're doing. So we don't know how to explain it to you. We don't know what you're doing. We're going to learn from you. I said, look, man, I don't want to be your guinea pig. I want to figure this shit out. I don't want to help you. I want you to help me. And so they couldn't help me. And so, yes, it wasn't like I had a watershed moment where it all came rushing back because one thing was familiar and then the dam broke and everything came back. It was somewhat slowly, but there was a watershed moment. And I'll tell you what it is. And I don't know if it's going to be a little odd. I was living in Washington. I had kind of retreated to live alone. I thought I was going to go die. I didn't want to burden my family. And I had gone there to live in isolation and basically kind of like a sanitarium. I didn't go to hospitals or anything like that. I figured they were all messed up. They were just going to make me worse, which they were. And I figured I just need to figure this out or just go there and die. I'm living in Washington. My girlfriend had come to see me. We were having a little bit of a long distance kind of thing as I was going through this. And we went to the movies. And we were seeing Shape of Water, a Guillermo del Toro movie that won an award some years ago. And she looks at me and I'm crying. And she's like, what's going on with the movie? Like, why are you crying? I'm like, don't worry about it. It's nothing. I'll tell you later. We went to get some food afterwards. And I said, I wasn't crying because it was a sad movie. That was actually kind of a happy part. Behind the doctor's head in the scene was a TV playing. Excuse me. It's pretty intense stuff. Because this is like a blessing. I said the TV show behind the guy's head in the scene was a show called Dobie Gillis from the 50s. And that show was before I was born, but I watched that show when I was a single parent. My son was 2 and I couldn't go out anywhere on Nick at Night. Remember that?
I do.
They would show all these old crappy shows because they had no money.
Yeah.
And so it was the first moment that I was able to recognize things for quite a while by that point, but I didn't know where I knew them from. This moment, in that moment, watching that movie, I realized that I knew what Dobie Gillis was and why I knew it. Because when I was a single parent, I stayed home with my son. And so for the first time in 4 years, I knew why I knew something. And I was in tears because my identity was there somewhere. And I was able to start getting it.
That's awesome.
Now, I'd like to tell you that from that moment, it all came flooding back. No, but it did begin to come back. And over the next couple of years, yes, I began to know who I was, not just remember, but know who I was.
Wow. That's an awesome story to just be in a random movie and see that one thing and have it come back. I think that's great.
She's watching this movie like thinking it's a happy scene. I'm like, it's over there crying. She's like, what's going on? Like, she's thinking, I don't know what's going on in the movie. Can you explain it to me? And I said, no, I'll tell you later.
Yes. Yeah. It's also interesting. You mentioned this and I really want to touch on it. And thank you for sharing this part because you said you're going to see these doctors and they don't know how to help you because they've never seen it. And all you want is help. And so it seems like a blessing and a curse at the same time. You're blessed because you are alive and you're a miracle to have survived this and to recover the way that you did, but you want to recover fully your previous self. And so they can't help you with that. So it seems like a blessing and a curse.
There's a chapter in this book called Blessing and a Curse, because that's exactly what the situation was. And honestly, I was not happy to be alive at all. I thought the God of death made a mistake, and I thought I was getting punished. I was like, all you've done is strip me from everything that I know of who I am and what I am, and my entire existence is pain and sorrow now. I don't want to live. I don't think it's good. I don't think it's a miracle. I don't think it's a blessing whatsoever. I don't know why this is happening, and I don't care. I want it to end. So when the doctors and specialists, again, I'm thinking, please help me. And they said, we don't know how to help you because you're the first person that's ever done this. We want to learn from you. And I said, no, I don't want you to study me. I want to get out of this. And so I began to work my ass off to figure it out. I began to study as I have done all my life. And keep in mind that it took a while. I couldn't even read. Even though I'm not a PhD, I started reading when I was 4. I've been devouring books nonstop my entire life. I love reading and studying. That's why I'm a writer. And so I've been devouring things. I'm a knowledge junkie. And so I figured the only way out of this was to figure it out. And so I began to study DAI, TBI, brain neurology, all these kind of things. And I began to construct and design, kind of like I did with Project Addiction, with addiction. I started to design my own recovery process that would fit my body, my constitution, my style, my brain, my intellect, the things I could do and the things I couldn't do. And eventually I designed a method, and that's what this book originally was going to be about. I was simply going to document my recovery methods to help other people going through something that they couldn't identify either. So yeah, it was very frustrating to say the least that specialist after specialist was like shrugging their shoulders saying, we don't know how to help you. We want you to tell us. And I didn't care about that. So yes, it was very, very frustrating and very difficult to figure it out, and no one could help me.
It's a lot to process, really, to think about every struggle that you're going through just from this incident.
All because I turned right instead of left that day. That's it.
And I'm glad you bring up the things that you do when you're talking about the EMS people being in a specific position, the priest being on the corner. I truly believe that people are put into our lives without us knowing and being in positions that are bigger for us to comprehend. So I'm with you on that for that sense of it, especially when you're explaining the story. This happened in 2013, right?
Yes.
What are you doing now? So where's the life that you're living now? How does that look?
4 years, the first 4 years was extremely intense, and I had a very cloudy version of knowing who I was and what I was. I was constantly in a daze, partly because of brain injury. I mean, DA is the most severe brain trauma, so partly because of that, and also because I am spiritually existing in two dimensions at once too. The material world that you know of, and also in this spiritual, spatial, spacey kind of, very, very spiritual place. And so for the first 4 years, that was very, very intense. And I could not orient very well back and forth between the two. It was a struggle. And yet I am working out, doing my physical therapy on my own and with my son. I built a house. I mean, literally with my own two hands, built some of the house because I had to get a place to live. And so I'm doing these things that even I'm like, how are you doing this? Like, I don't know how this is going on. And so the first 4 years were very, very intense and confusing, and yet I'm functioning. And after that, I realized, oh my God, let me back up for 1 second. The DAI brain injury, diffuse axonal injury, this is very important. 90% of DAI injuries never recover. Of the 10% that do, they're either institutionalized or dead by suicide within 4 years. I'm the only one that came out of that. 90% don't wake up at all, and the other 10% are dead, are institutionalized, and or dead by suicide within 4 years. And so after the first 4 years, suddenly I'm like, oh my God, I think I'm getting a little bit better. I didn't have a plan for that. I didn't have a plan for coming back. And so now I got to figure out, I got to restore my life. I had already let my practice kind of go away, even though I was still involved, because I didn't feel I could administer to people as well as I used to be able to do, but I kind of was, and trying to change my life. And so after the first 4 years of being very confused and having a tough time, but functioning at a high level, I went back to Los Angeles, and everything had kind of been asunder. My relationship of 13 years was a casualty of all this. It was more than the two of us could bear together. She could not bear the whole thing. And so I lost that. I'm heartbroken. I'm at a loss. My career is over. And again, I've kind of had it. I'm like, you know what? I would have rather just died. It would have been way smarter and easier. This is bullshit. Surviving, this is not a miracle. This is not a blessing at all. Dead would have been just fine for me, because this is nothing but pure ongoing suffering nonstop for 6 years now. And then I had an epiphany, and I decided to move again. I reunited with my son, and he was up on his feet and doing really well, becoming a firefighter. And again, I'm trying to figure out what to do with my life. And then I relocated again and moved to my spiritual ashram in the middle of the US. And I kind of, once again, experienced some cathartic recovery here. And now I'm on a course. I'm building my career as an author. I'm promoting this to help people, as the book is titled, A Memoir of Near-Death Experience and a Guide to Spiritual Awakening. What people get in this very big, thick book is not just a story of miracles, documented miracles, evidence, undeniable ones, and documented, but also my life prior to this. I was a mystic and spiritualist, and we're not just talking new agey pop culture stuff. I'm a student and scholar. I'm a master theologian. I can debate with the best of them and win, and I not only studied them all my life, but I practice them, and I love and revere all of them. And so I could not tell this story without infusing what it meant to me on a spiritual level, because it was the only way that made sense. And as I developed this memoir, I'm like, oh my God, this is much more, because I got to explain all these things. So it became also a guide to spiritual awakening, which teaches you how, same as my addiction courses did, teaches you how to become more spiritual and develop spiritual consciousness for yourself. So that's kind of where I'm at now. Is I didn't die. well, I mean, I did, but I didn't die from dying.
That's a sentence.
Yeah, I'm going to start using that a little bit. I didn't die from dying. And I've written this book, and it gets released within a handful of days now. And me and my team I gave my heart and blood and soul to this. I literally died for it. And obviously, the burning question for many people over the years has been, what do you think this happened for? You must be destined for great things. And I'm like, when I was in the hospital and somebody said this to me for the first time, I said, I don't give a shit. It was a ripoff. I don't care what I was destined to do. I don't care. This ain't worth it. I don't want to go through this. Now, there comes the emotion again. Now I'm grateful because I know that my experience will benefit many people in many diverse ways. I will not only be able to, people can use this story and experience and documentation to be able to recover from severe trauma themselves, not just brain trauma, injury, triumphing over tragedy, but also to develop themselves spiritually, consciously, and begin to live on higher octaves. And I'm grateful that I feel I was used by spiritual forces. I was exploited for this destiny and purpose. Maybe not. Maybe I'm just brain damaged delusional. It could be. Could very well be. But I documented this and I wrote it, and I'm an award-winning author because I've had a natural knack for that too. I'm a good writer. And so I've told the story the best way I know how. It's, as I shared with you, some of the stories, they're in the book, and it's very passionate. And so that's kind of where I'm at.
That's awesome. Can you tell us about your book, when it's going to be released, and the name of it? Go forward with whatever you want to talk about with it. I see it right there within the portal.
This is a little bit of flyer. So within the portal, a near-death experience memoir and guide to spiritual awakening. And it tells the entire experience. It covers, it's hard to describe exactly. It's a big book because everything you need, it's a one-stop shop, and it's told in a narrative style. So instead of just, as I studied spirituality throughout my life, I had to read academic books. That was very challenging. It was very, very tough, sometimes very boring and very cerebral and very intellectual and not very exciting all the time. What I've been able to do is distill that in language and in a creative narrative that people will enjoy in true experience rather than just academia. So the book itself was in process during the entire death experience, which is an ongoing event. It still is an ongoing event. It wasn't a one-time thing that wasn't near death and it happened. I came out of my body and I came back and everything went back to normal at all. It's an ongoing event. It's an ongoing supernatural set of occurrences. And so the book was completed just a few weeks ago. The editors had their say. That's all done. It is now packed. This is called a galley copy. You can see a line across this. This is because the printers have just sent me my galley copy so they can proof it and I can say yay or nay if there's anything wrong with it. So if this is there, it says not for resale. So the publishers and the printers, I've got this, and once I look over it, it'll be released in print, in audio, and in ebook within a few days. And within the portal.com is the ebook and audiobook. I think they're already available. And I have a publicist and some people working on the team. They've done a phenomenal job to get me out and get this word out. And again, I'll put this together and make it available so you can actually buy it and you can experience it. And again, it's not something you just read or listen to. It's something you experience. It will cause paradigm shifts in your consciousness and in your reality. That's what it's intended to do.
I just want to thank you so much for telling your story. I think it's an absolute miracle. And I'm so happy that you have recovered from this to the point that you have. And I know it's going to be a lifelong recovery. I'm sure you learn something new every day. I learn something new every day. And I'm sure that, what you're going through and the spiritual part and the physical part and all that it's such a cool thing to hear when people go through things like this. And it sounds like a terrible event that has silver linings to it. And I thank you for sharing that with me. I'm excited to read the book. I'm excited to check it out. And I really appreciate you coming on.
Thank you. You mentioned the recovery. I'd like to close with that. I and my family were told when I was still in ICU, again, that if he ever wakes up, which he won't, if he does, he'll never be able to take care of himself. I was supposed to be a vegetable. I defied that. Then I was told I'll never be able to be self-reliant. So yes, I have a couple glitches. My left leg doesn't work as well as it used to. I used to be a 4.0 tennis player, 4.5, which is actually pretty strong if you know much about tennis. Okay? I'm not anymore. but I go out and I play every day. And I play against a ball machine that works me, and I'm moving and I'm sweating and I'm balancing and I'm doing it. I cannot backpack the Sierras like I once did, but I still backpack and I still hike. I cannot run like I used to run, but I still jog and I walk and I hike and I still scuba dive. And I went to Turks Caicos with my son a little while ago. And so the recovery is miracles. And what I'm hoping is that, yes, on all levels, if for nothing else, I hope it inspires people to never give up. And let me give you a quick little anecdote on that. When I was just home from the hospital, I came across some little news documentary thing about a guy that was climbing Mount Everest with no legs. He lost both of his legs in the war, both. And he climbed Mount Everest with Sherpas. It took him forever to do it. And I remember seeing this and thinking to myself, shut the fuck up, you whiny little bitch. Don't you ever complain again. Look what this guy is doing. He inspired me and showed me beyond the shadow of a doubt of what you can do if you keep trying. And don't you dare say you can't. And so if nothing else, I hope my story and my miracles can inspire people when they're down to say, you know what? If this guy can do it, he ain't special. I can do it. So yes, you can.
Those are powerful words, and I know that you've definitely inspired me. And I know that you'll inspire everyone that listens to this. So I want to thank you so much for that.
Thank you.
To be featured on the show, email us at criticalincidencepod@gmail.com.